Hello and welcome to the Mind Map. Today we're going to be going over Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. Now the reason I'm doing this one so quickly is because when I did the mind map on David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, so many of you recommended that I also do a mind map on Extreme Ownership. So I'm just kind of delivering it to you guys because this is what you asked for. And this was a great book. When I went over it, I learned a ton of things that I didn't know, and I relearned a ton of things that I knew but hadn't been executing in a way that actually led to me living a better life. And I'm sure that's what we're all really here for and why we're on this personal development and growth journey. With that all out of the way, you guys are really going to enjoy this book if you're into U.S. Navy SEALs. That's definitely one type of person that would be interested in reading this book. If you're interested in learning how to have more freedom through cultivating your own discipline, or if you're interested in leading, if you're interested in leading a team, interested in leading a business, or just interested in leading yourself. Let's get into the introduction. First, we'll talk about Jocko. Now, Jocko, I first saw him on the Joe Rogan Experience, and man, what an amazing man. So well spoken. He's got just a great voice. He's also a decorated retired Navy SEAL officer. He's a leadership instructor, speaker, and executive coach. He spent 20 years in the U.S. Navy SEALs teams, and he's got a great podcast called the Jocko Podcast, which I recommend you check out. He's got a lot of great insights. He's got some cool guests, and of course, he's got that really great podcaster voice. Leif, his co-author, is a decorated retired Navy SEAL officer as well. He's a leadership instructor, speaker, executive coach, just like Jocko. He spent 13 years in the Navy, including 9 as a SEAL. And both of these men obviously are quite amazing people, and their book is equally amazing. The quote that I pull out of the book to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be going over today is that the idea for this book was born from the realization that the principles critical for SEAL success on the battlefield, how SEALs train and prepare their leaders, how they mold and develop high-performance teams, and how they lead combat are directly applicable to success in any group, organization, corporation, business, and to a broader degree, life. So that's essentially what we're going to be going over today, is just that Navy SEAL approach to leadership. They continued on in the book. He said, "This book provides the reader with our formula for success, the mindset and guiding principles that enable SEAL leaders and combat units to achieve extraordinary results. It demonstrates how to apply these directly in business and in life to likewise achieve victory." And like I said, we're going to talk about that Navy SEAL approach to leadership. Jocko and Leif were two of the most senior leaders in some of the most interesting battles in Iraq. This book is filled with a ton of their stories and how they were able to lead their team to win those battles. It also is kind of full of a lot of stories of them being trainers and a lot of their stories about what they saw when they were training some of the new SEALs that were coming in, when they were the SEAL officers, I believe. Plus some great action points that we can input into our own lives, whether it's with leading teams, business, or ourselves, all the reasons that I told you that you might be interested in this book. The most important part about that quote above is this book is not about how SEALs chose their leaders necessarily, although that could be a part of it. It's about how they train and mold them, letting us know that even if we're not a born leader, this book is going to teach us how to become one. It really is a process, not necessarily something we're innately born with. The book is packed with a ton of great stories, more than I could fit into the mind map today or any mind map that I created. It's a very great book with tons of great stories. I recommend you pick up the book or pick up the audiobook and listen to the guys tell their stories themselves. You can check them out online at the Jocko Podcast and, of course, the Extreme Ownership website. I believe they actually have a new book that's out as well that you could check out if you're interested. Now, getting into the meat of the mind map, I have 2 points here, 2 topics that are highlighted in gold. Those are the 2 topics that I think were the most important out of the book. Other than that, I've kind of given you a distillation of what I think are the most important points from this book. But stay tuned for both of these gold ones. Make sure you get both of the top 2 points from the book. The first point that we're going to make is definition. I explained that as a SEAL officer in charge of training for the West Coast SEAL teams, we put SEAL units through highly demanding scenarios to get them ready for combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. When SEAL leaders were placed in the worst case scenario training situations, it was almost always the leaders' attitudes that determined whether their SEAL units would ultimately succeed or fail. We knew how hard the training missions were because we had designed them. In virtually every case, the SEAL troops and the platoons didn't perform well, had leaders who blamed everyone and everything else. This is a cornerstone story from the book. Their troops, their subordinates, their leaders, or their subordinate leader, or the scenario. They blamed the SEAL training instructor staff. They blamed the inadequate equipment or the experience level of their men. In other words, they were just looking for literally anything to blame other than themselves. They refused to accept responsibility. Poor performance and mission failure were the result. The best performing SEAL units had leaders who accepted responsibility for everything, every mistake, every failure or shortfall. Those leaders would own it. During the debrief after the training mission, those good SEAL leaders took ownership of their failures, sought guidance on how to improve, and figured out a way to overcome the challenges on the next iteration. The best leaders checked their egos, accepted blame, sought out constructive criticism, and took detailed notes for improvement. They exhibited extreme ownership, and that's why I was talking about the definition. That's the definition of extreme ownership, is accepting responsibility. And as a result, their SEAL platoons and task units dominated. And again, extreme ownership is taking responsibility for everything. And it's a great example to me of fixed versus growth mindset. I just did a book review on Carol Dweck's book Mindset, and she tells us that there are two possible mindsets that we could have. Fixed mindset is where you or your team's level of ability is fixed. The blaming leaders would fall into this category. Instead of looking for something that potentially they could improve upon, they're saying, I'm fixed as to what I am, or I'm already good enough, or whatever it is, and they start blaming other things outside of themselves as looking for the reason why they weren't able to be successful. Whereas growth mindset is where you or your team's level of ability is changeable. The winning leaders would fall into this category. For example, they aren't afraid to accept responsibility, in part because they know that it's how they're going to learn and how they become better. It's no wonder that they're winners. And in fact, inside the book Mindset, Carol talks about how people that have the fixed mindset, really what it is it's their fear of not being adequate. It's their fear of not being good enough. And because they don't see themselves as being able to improve on themselves, it really speaks to their core as, hey, if I can't accomplish this thing, it's because I'm not good enough. It's not because I haven't learned some of the tips and tricks. It's not because I haven't been able to expand as a person yet. It's not because I haven't spent enough time, and etc. It's all about them as a person, which for the people with growth mindset, it's not about them as a person. It just says that, hey, I have room to improve. And what I would offer to you here today in the mind map is to think about your own life. When things go well, what do you do? And are you blaming other people or circumstances? Or when things don't go well, what do you do? Are you blaming other people and circumstances? And then think, why am I doing that? Why am I blaming these other people? Why am I blaming the circumstances? Why am I blaming the system? Why am I blaming the instructors, like they said here? Because now that you know that winners accept responsibility, you have no excuse other than just to save face. For example, if you are in the fixed mindset still and you're afraid that if you're not good enough, if you can't accomplish something, it means that you're not good enough and you can never be good enough. The only way that you can save face is by blaming other people, and that's obviously not what we want to do, because it's not going to get us to become a good leader. It's not going to get us to become any stronger, because it's a reaction of the ego. And to me, it's one that we need to eliminate if we want to be successful, especially in leadership. Before becoming a personal trainer, I lost over 40 pounds, and I put on a ton of muscle, probably much more than 40 pounds of fat lost, but I put on a ton of muscle. But before I could lose any of that weight, I had to do one thing. I had to accept responsibility. When I was fat, I would blame it on almost anything. My genetics, bad food in the house, or almost anything at all. And because I was afraid to look in the mirror and say, this is my responsibility, now what? That's kind of the same thing that David Goggins talks about. He's saying essentially, you have to take responsibility to move forward. And that's the same thing that you're going to have to do with extreme ownership. You have to own responsibility for the problems that you're facing, for the problems that your team is facing. And with that, we're going to move on to no bad teams, the next point, which is actually, again, another story about a team. It was a shocking turn of events. Boat Crew 6, the same team, the same circumstances, only under new leadership, went from the worst boat crew in the class to the best. Gone was their cursing and frustration, and gone too was the constant scrutiny and individual attention they had received from the SEAL instructor staff. Had I not witnessed this amazing transformation, I might have doubted it. But it was a glaring, undeniable example of one of the most fundamental and important truths at the heart of extreme ownership. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And both these guys are now leadership coaches, so you can see that it has a big leadership slant into the book. But if you're not a leader yet, and you don't maybe expect to be a leader coming up in your near future or even in your far future, I want you to think, you are the leader of yourself. So you can take this no bad teams and just apply it to yourself if you're worried that you aren't a leader right now and don't have any plans to be. This comes from a story of when Leif supervised a Hell Week. And Hell Week is not a fitness test. While it did require some athletic ability, every student that survived the weeks of BUDS training prior to Hell Week had already demonstrated adequate fitness to graduate. It was not a physical test, but a mental one. If you don't know anything about Hell Week, I recommend that you go and check out some videos on YouTube. They basically put these guys through the ringer in order to kind of separate the people who are SEALs from the people who aren't SEALs. And here's the story from the book. Students were split into boat crews and had to carry boats weighing over 200 pounds for miles and miles. Then they had to take them back out in the ocean and bring them back in, all the way through the waves, around these buoys, around these pylons. It was absolutely brutal. The worst part is that it's a competition. And if your team loses, you actually have to go through extra work, while the winners get to take a round off. Well, Team 2 was winning every single race, and Team 6, the one that we were talking about before, was losing. Team 2 worked together flawlessly, and Team 6 ended up just blaming each other. So you're seeing a through line. So what did Leif do? He switched the leaders of each team. What do you think happened next? Well, the boat crew that was the worst, which was number 6, suddenly became the best. This is an example that there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. When boat crew number 6, this team that the leader thought, for example, the leader thought that this team was the worst. They didn't have the athletic ability that everyone else had. They had a bad boat, and etc. But once they switched, where leader number 2 came onto team number 6, he didn't blame anyone. He didn't blame any of the equipment. He took responsibility, and he turned that team into the number 1 team on the competition. So it's very interesting to see how one small change of the leader, the position of leadership, made all the difference in this story of the 2 different boat crews. So that was no bad teams, only bad leaders. And really quickly, we're going to kind of get away a little bit from the leadership. We're going to go into truly believe. In order to convince and inspire others to follow and accomplish a mission, a leader must be a true believer in your mission. Even when others doubt and question the amount of risk, asking, is it worth it? The leader must believe in the greater cause. If a leader does not believe, he or she will not take the risk required to overcome the inevitable changes necessary to win. And they did not, then they will not be able to convince others, especially the frontline troops who must execute the missions to do so. Leaders must always operate with the understanding that they are part of something greater than themselves, and their own personal interests. They must impart this understanding. Their teams down to the tactical level, operators on the ground. Far more important than training or equipment, a resolute belief in the mission is critical for any team or organization to win and achieve big results. So you can see this truly believe. You also have to cultivate this burning desire, a concept that we've talked about a lot on this channel, coming from Napoleon Hill. You need to understand why you want to accomplish a mission. And then you have to become a true believer before you can create true believers of your people. Now, also, here's another point, right? If you're an entrepreneur, say for example, you're someone creating YouTube videos. I'll speak from my own experience. One thing that I really need to do in order to be successful with this YouTube channel is really cultivate the true belief that mind mapping books is going to be able to give a ton of value to a lot of you people out there. I believe that there's so many people out there that think differently and that think better when mind maps are used. And I want to bring the art of mind mapping to this creative type of person, this entrepreneurial type person who maybe it didn't work for them in school, maybe writing notes out on a page is boring to them, and their mind is better at making connections and learning kinesthetically than it is learning from either a talk. Maybe it's definitely better than learning from books, and that's my mission. That's why I'm bringing it to you guys. And I truly believe that mind mapping is the answer to a lot of the problems that the public school system is facing with creative people and entrepreneurs out there like us. So I truly believe in my mission, and what I'm doing right now is sharing my belief, and slowly but surely, there's a lot of you being recruited into that same mission. So think about your most important project right now in your life. First, think about if you truly believe in if this mission is worthwhile, something that you might want to ask yourself before you even get started, and that by accomplishing it, you're a part of something greater. Second, think about if you have absolute belief that you and your team can accomplish the mission. I have absolute belief that sharing these mind maps with you guys is going to get the greater idea of mind mapping out there into the consciousness, and through that, I'm going to be able to share it with a lot more people. Absolutely. No matter what the circumstances, those two beliefs are what is going to make the difference. You have to have those two beliefs. As I say in the book, even with less equipment or less training, the team with a leader who believes above all else will prevail. This goes double for people leading an online audience. Imagine if I had given up doing these mind maps for you. Imagine if I didn't have the belief that mind mapping is the more effective way to convey information. Of course, there's a lot of people out there where mind mapping isn't the most effective way to convey information. But I know for me and other creative people like me, mind mapping is just as close to a godsend as we possibly could get. It's a way for us to make connections, it's a way for us to think kinesthetically, and it's a way for us to be creative with information. Now let's talk about John, who's one of my coaching clients who took advantage of the free coaching call at the link down below. He has an online information business. It's great. I won't share the details because I haven't asked permission at the time of creating this mind map, but maybe I'll ask him and I can share the story a little bit more in depth later. But he was struggling to build an audience, and he told me that there's just no market for this. Well, I could see that this was simply a limiting belief. After all, I loved his course, and it was obvious to me that other people would too. Now, I don't want to give too much away about the course because again, I didn't share it, and it's it's a good business. It's a good business. So we dove in, searched his top keywords in every search engine imaginable. What were we looking for? Not for no competition, but instead we looked for competition. We wanted to make sure that someone out there is making money in his niche. And guess what? We found some. That helped John to see that it was possible. And he even came up with a few ideas on how he could partner and market with some of his competition. And just as another side note, we also looked at the competition and said, here's how we could optimize what they're already offering. And just by doing that small amount of innovation, we made John different enough that he was going to be able to make some real money in his niche by offering something more valuable than his competition. I think it's an amazing example of someone taking responsibility for themselves and their cause. But first, John needed to believe. And that's simply what I helped him do. I helped him find his belief so that he could keep going on with his online business, which if any of you run an online business, you know sometimes it can get difficult to keep on going. The next point we're going to make here is about making a call. They say that on the battlefield, countless problems compound in a snowball effect. Every challenge, complex in its own right, each demanding attention. But a leader must remain calm and make the best decisions possible. To do this, SEAL combat leaders utilize prioritize and execute. I love this little phrase and this mental hack that we can do. To do this, SEAL combat leaders utilize prioritize and execute. We verbalize the principle with this direction: relax, look around, and make a call. Even the most competent of leaders can be overwhelmed if they try to tackle multiple problems or a number of tasks simultaneously. Just a side note, I wanted to let you know that this is also something that John was struggling with, is that he had so many different ideas, he just didn't know what to execute on. And by searching and seeing the competition and thinking how we could innovate on his particular product, we were able to come up with something that we think is going to be successful, but also we just simply made a call. And that helped John in and of itself immensely. The team will likely fail at each of those tasks. Instead, leaders must determine the highest priority task and execute. When overwhelmed, fall back upon this principle: prioritize and execute. So I think the battlefield is a good parallel for life here. How many of us feel that snowball effect on countless different problems? I know at certain points in my life I definitely have, and it can feel overwhelming. This point right here is extremely helpful and is perfect for us because we talk about action bias so much on this channel. Action bias is coming from John C. Maxwell. It's coming from so many different books that I've already done reviews on this channel. What do the SEALs do when they feel overwhelmed by problems? They stop, relax, look around, and make a call, or they take action. They would rather not have all the information. They would rather not accomplish all the things. They would rather take action on one specific thing. More specifically, they look for what's most important and highest priority. Then the only thing that they do, only that one thing. Because as we all know, multitasking is a recipe for failure. So I invite you, prioritize and execute. What's going on in your life right now where you're feeling overwhelmed by that snowball effect of compounding problems? Stop, look around, relax, and make a call. Start taking action towards what you want to accomplish. Now we come to our second bolded point here, our second most important point of the entire mind map, and that's about discipline. And this is probably the most quoted part of this book, and I see this quote everywhere. Discipline starts every day when the first alarm clock goes off in the morning. I say first alarm clock because I have 3, as I was taught by one of the most feared and respected instructors in SEAL training: 1 electric, 1 battery powered, and 1 wind up. That way there is no excuse for not getting out of bed, especially with all that rests on that decisive moment. The moment the alarm goes off is the first test. It sets the tone for the rest of the day. The test is not a complex one. When the alarm goes off, do you get up out of bed, or do you lie there in comfort and fall back to sleep? If you have the discipline to get out of bed, you win. You pass the test. If you are mentally weak for that moment, and you let that weakness keep you in bed, you fail. Though it seems small, that weakness translates to more significant decisions. But if you exercise discipline, that too translates to a much more substantial elements in your life. This is from a chapter called Discipline Equals Freedom, which since the book has come out has been probably the most quoted part of the book. People are resonating with this simple little thing of getting up when your alarm goes off. It's so simple. Why do people love it so much? They realize that the discipline equals freedom thing really rings true. Jocko talks a lot about how we have to have the discipline to actually end up giving us more freedom and flexibility. When we have the discipline to exercise, we have more freedom and flexibility to move. When we have the discipline to wake up early, we have more freedom and flexibility with what we do in the day because we've gotten so much done before anyone even wakes up. The alarm clock is a good attention set for having discipline throughout the day. I found that how I start my day is usually how my day goes. So if I wake up late and check social media first thing, that's likely what my day is going to be like. But if, instead, I wake up early and crack on to one of these mind maps first thing, I will accomplish so much more in the day. That gives me a lot of freedom. And it does take a little bit of discipline, especially I find in the first 3 weeks. But after I've been able to get through that first 3 weeks, it seems like the discipline slowly morphs more and more into freedom. And our final point here is about leading. The entire book has really been about leadership. And this quote tells you why leadership is so important. They say, while there is no guarantee of success in leadership, there is one thing that is certain. Leading people is the most challenging and therefore most gratifying undertaking of all human endeavors. So with that humbling reward in the distance, embrace the burden of command and go forward onto your battlefield. In whatever arena that may be, with the disciplined resolve to take extreme ownership, lead, and win. I want to thank you guys for being with me here today. I'm very, very excited for the upcoming mind maps, and I hope you tune in. I'll see you in the next one.